The second last funding deadline for Liberal leadership candidates is tomorrow, as candidates need to secure $125,000 by 5 p.m. Eastern in order to stay in the race. Tomorrow's installment is part of the $350,000 total sum the party requires to be paid before February 17th. It's a figure some contenders like Chrystia Freeland have criticized for being too high, and Karina Gould has warned supporters she might not make it past the next deposit deadline. And Karina Gould, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, David.
So you said today that despite the efforts from the party's establishment, you're still in the race. What have you been battling against? What are these efforts in this contest?
Well, look, the party set the entry fee for this race very, very high. We've seen that that means that there are a number of potential candidates that may have run that didn't, and there are a couple that have already dropped out because of that. My campaign is powered by people across this country, and so we are well on track to meet the fundraising deadline, but it is high. And my campaign didn't exist when the party set these rules, but we're doing everything that we can to meet it.
Okay, they set it high. Do you think they set it high for the reasons that have been suggested to make sure that, a credible candidate can get into this with a broad level of support? Or do you think they set it high? You've used the word coronation a few times because they were trying to orchestrate a coronation. How do you view the motivation here?
Well, look, I don't think a coronation is good for the party. I think we've been down that road in 2011, and I think what's best is to have a diversity of voices that are having a debate about who we are as a party and what we want to do as a country. The party set this fee high. They'll have to explain why they did that. But what I think the consequence of it is that we have fewer candidates in this race. And if we think about what this fee represents, I mean, the Conservatives had a $300,000 entry fee over 8 months. The Liberal Party set this at $350,000 over 8 weeks. I'm not sure that the Liberal Party of Canada raises $1.7 million in this same amount of time. But that being said, we're seeing energy, we're seeing momentum, we're seeing Canadians across this country wanting to get involved. And I have to say that, over 85% of my donations that I've received are $200 or less. That means that people believe in what I'm putting forward. I'm connecting with them. I'm resonating with them. And, we've got a little bit ways to go to make it to the finish line, but we're well on our way. And I'm so buoyed and excited by the energy that I'm receiving. And the fact that people are choosing to support me and make those donations is extremely encouraging and motivating.
A high volume of low-dollar donations is often a sign of widespread support from the rank and file, the grassroots of the party. But it takes a lot longer to build it up to that key dollar amount, right? And so as we're speaking now, from what I take from what you said, Karina Gould, and correct me if I'm wrong, the $125,000 that you need by 5 o'clock tomorrow, you don't have it yet? Am I understanding that correctly? But you think you'll have it by tomorrow?
We are very close. I'm confident we're going to have it by tomorrow. So if anyone who is watching and supports me in having a real race in this leadership, go to karinagould.ca and make a donation. But I'm confident that we're going to get there tomorrow. We're very, very close. And as you said, a high number of small donations is indicative of widespread support in the membership. And what I'm hearing from people across this country is that my candidacy gives them hope. It gives them optimism, and it gives them energy for the future. Okay,
you're confident you're going to make the deadline tomorrow, but then you've got to turn around and raise another $125,000, if my math is right, by the 17th of February. So this speaks to the challenge that you have to deal with. So if it's last minute now, are you worried about that final one? Because that's what gets you into the debate, and that's what gets you on the ballot.
Look, I mean, the party has made some decisions about having the debates after that final fundraising fee. Again, when we look at other parties, they would often spread these payments out more. So it gives people an opportunity to watch these debates. I mean, last week when I was on your program, we talked about the fact that the party hadn't really yet set the debate deadline. I agree with, some of the other candidates that we should have more debates and we should have them sooner. This is a very short race. And I think it's only a good thing for us as candidates to have these debates. Right. It's only a good thing for us as a party to do this. But look, when it comes to the next fundraising deadline, again, did the party make a decision to set another high fee in a short period of time? Yes. But what I can say is the fact that we have met every single one of these deadlines, are going to meet this next one, gives me great confidence that I'm going to
Mm.
be able to do it again next week, despite the challenge, because again, thousands of people across the country have already made a contribution to my campaign. And, we're just getting more and more each day. The
Right.
momentum is building, and that's exciting.
Okay, well, last question about the money, because then I do want to ask you about your policies. But I know you're confident, and it's important to have that in a race like this, because you need to believe you can do it, because it's a big job. But is there a danger that you don't make it to the past deadline, and you don't make it to the debate stage and to the final ballot? Because this is daunting, and there's a lot of competition for donations. Like the Ontario election as well is happening concurrent with this, and people get spread thin. So I just wonder, is there a danger of this?
Well, look, I mean, there's only so many dollars to go around, but again, my campaign is different. It's not
Mhm.
funded by deep pockets, it's funded by people. And, when I'm getting donations of $25, 100, $200 that are saying, these are something that you're someone that we believe in, and we're putting our hard-earned dollars into your campaign. It's motivating and it's exciting, and I'm grateful for anyone who has that belief and that confidence in me to send their money to my campaign. So, I'm excited and motivated by it, and it's been wonderful to have conversations with people right across the country who are giving what they can, even though they know it's a high entry fee, but they believe in what I'm putting forward. They believe in the change that I represent for the party, and they believe in the opportunity that I represent for the party in the next election.
Okay, one of the ideas you put forward today was you wanted to boost the first-time home buyers incentive. This is to make it easier for people to get into the housing market. There's been some criticism of programs like these incentives because by making it more lucrative, it allows people to bid up the prices of homes. So why choose this path when the supply challenge still hasn't been dealt with properly?
So this is one aspect of a comprehensive plan that I put forward today that deals with tackling homelessness. It deals with increasing supply, but it also deals with helping first-time home buyers enter the market. And this is actually a program that works quite well in the United Kingdom. And we put this program in place as a government, but it didn't have huge uptake because the mortgage share was not that great, like 5 to 10%. And so it's not enough of an incentive for first time home buyers who usually don't have big incomes to get into the market.
Mm.
And what we see across the country is that because of high prices, it's hard for first time home buyers to get into the market. So I'm suggesting that we increase what the potential share of the mortgage could be is up to 50%, similar to what they have in the United Kingdom.
This would be the ownership stake the government would have, or the equity stake the government would have by basically co-signing your mortgage.
Correct. And so this is a great way for first-time home buyers to get into the market. And then over time, they can purchase back some of
Mm.
that equity or the entire part of it so that they own the entire amount of the house. And one of the reasons why this works so well in the UK is because normally over time, your income also increases.
Mm.
So your ability to pay a larger portion of your mortgage also increases over time as well. And it's a good thing for the government because it also becomes an asset for the government over time. So I think, is a great program that we can put in place to enable more first-time home buyers into the market while at the same time addressing
Right.
the housing continuum of making sure that we have more supply and that we're really tackling homelessness.
But this is part, as you say, of a bigger, broader, more comprehensive plan. But one of the things you do talk about is federal provincial housing accords, I think is the language you've used. Are we talking about big programs like we had with daycare, or childcare, excuse me, like we're seeing with other programs where the federal government needs to go through these big negotiations, put cash on the table to get provinces and municipalities to deal with a problem that's really in their jurisdiction? Is that what we're talking about here?
So what I'm talking about here is it's a combination of an agreement with a province or territory, but in combination with additional funds for the Rapid Housing Initiative. So, one of the reasons why people stay chronically unhoused is
Mm.
because they don't have access to the wraparound supports, be it healthcare, mental health, that they need to become more stably housed, right? So what I'm suggesting is that we kind of supercharge and redo the Rapid Housing Initiative to get people off the streets, out of shelters, into permanent housing. And then we work with provinces and territories to say, let's sign these agreements and we can provide additional resources to make sure that the folks that we are now housing
Right.
have access to the services that you provide.
Right.
So it would be negotiated with provinces and territories. But honestly, David, it's one of the only ways that we're really going to tackle the homelessness.
It's the housing
crisis.
first approach, as they call it.
Yeah, it's
So,
the
yeah.
housing first, but also access to services. Because if you don't have those wraparound supports, people end up back on the street, right? And so whether it's mental health, whether it's addictions, whether it's healthcare in general, these are things that we need to make sure that we're providing to people to keep them off the streets and then to give them greater stability. And that is a good thing for us as a society. You know, we are facing not just a housing crisis, but also a homelessness crisis. You know, we all see encampments, we all see more people on our streets. And so what I'm proposing is let's get them off the streets, get them into stable housing, get them the supports that they need, and that will be better for all of us.
Okay, Karina Gould, we're out of time, but look, we're on Friday at 5 o'clock, which is the deadline for the money. So let us know one way or another, please, and we'll talk about it right off the top of our show. Thank you very much, Karina Gould, Liberal Leadership Unit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, there's another big deadline in the Liberal leadership race this week as candidates need to submit $125,000 by 5 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. It's the second last installment the 5 remaining hopefuls will need to pay in order to hit the $350,000 fee required by the party. So far, Chrystia Freeland and Mark Carney's teams have both confirmed to CBC News that they have paid the fee. Karina Gould told us earlier that she hasn't yet met the threshold.
The party set the entry fee for this race very, very high. And, you know, we've seen that that means that there are a number of potential candidates that may have run that didn't. And there are a couple that have already dropped out because of that. It is high. And, you know, my campaign didn't exist when the party set these rules, but we're doing everything that we can to meet it.
And Liberal leadership candidate Frank Baylis joins me now in the studio. Frank Baylis, it's good to meet you in person. Thank you for coming in.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You got a big deadline tomorrow, $125,000 due by 5 p.m. Eastern Time. The various gates to decide whether someone stays in. You going to make that deadline?
Yes, we are. Yeah, no problem.
No worries whatsoever?
We've been fundraising, and I actually leave here to go to another fundraising. So there's a lot of fundraising that's necessary. But yeah, we have that money ready, and we're on track for the next payment as well.
Karina Gould said some things today that she called this an aggressive fundraising deadline, an effort by the party establishment to keep people out of the race. Do you share Karina Gould's concerns about the way this race is being administered and run?
Look, it's a challenging time for everybody. It's a very short period, and that brings in all kinds of challenges. So obviously fundraising is one of them. You could look at it from my perspective. People say, Frank, you don't live in the Ottawa bubble, so you're not one of the known candidates in that sense, and that's true. So I have my challenges. We all have our challenges, but I think the party has put together a process that we have to live with and work within, and I'm happy to do so.
I think not living in the Ottawa bubble is probably an asset and a redeeming quality based on some of the conversations that happen in this town.
It is, and it's the challenge that it brings to me is that people say, hey, quote, you're not known, which I am actually known, but not in this circle. So my challenge is to get myself more known in this political circle, if I could say that. Yeah.
Well, one way to do that is in the debates, but we don't know when those are going to be, right? The party has only said they will not happen until after February 17th, and that's like the fundraising and contribution deadline has passed then, so it's difficult for someone who isn't known to get on that stage with the other candidates early and make that impression. I mean, what are your thoughts about it being so late in the process?
I think that the party's doing what they think is right. I think they want to make sure that people that are in the debate are people that can go the full distance. I understand that. I understand the concerns that other candidates may have about fundraising and that. It's not been easy for me either. I don't want to make that sound like that, but I have a lifetime of 30, 40 years in business, helping people, helping businesses, helping my work in human rights. So I've got a big bassin, as we say, a big group of people that I can call upon, and I am calling on them. And luckily for me, they're stepping up to support me.
One of the criticisms of the process, and I appreciate this, the party has had to scramble, you know, to deal with changing circumstances, but that by doing it this way with the high fundraising bar, the late debate, but the shortened time frame, it really benefits the front-runner, well-known, more established candidates, Mark Carney in particular, and Chrystia Freeland to another degree. Do you see it that way?
I tend not to worry too much about things I can't control. So what I'm focused on is what I'm trying to get my message out to Canadians. What do I want to bring to the table? And I have a lot of ideas that I think are going to resonate with Canadians. So that's where my mind is. I'm not really overly concerned when given the parameters of what I have to work within, I have to work within them. And I understand the party's challenges in that sense. So what I'm trying to do is really just get my message out now, David.
Okay, your message today, you had a reform plan for the way politics works to some degree. You talked about introducing a term limit for senators and MPs. 10 years for senators, also for MPs? Is that what it is, or how many terms is it for MPs?
So for a senator, it would be 10 years. That's
Right.
it, that's all. For an MP, because of the way our system works, after 10 years, you would not be allowed to run again for a prolonged period. And that's to be debated, but let's say it's another 10 years. So what I'm trying to do here is say to Canadians, we don't need a professional class of politicians. What we need is people coming with their expertise to Ottawa, making great laws, and then when they've contributed, making space for other great Canadians with their great ideas. So I want to see turnover. I also want to have MPs coming that there's a timeline. Get to work. Don't waste time. You're not here forever. So I'm a professional engineer. I'm not a professional politician, and I think that we don't need professional career politicians. And when they have professional politicians, the math changes, because the primary objective then is to get re-elected, not necessarily do what's right for the country.
But I wonder, is this constitutional? Can you limit people's ability to run for elected office, and reforming the Senate? You're a Quebecer. Once you open up that Pandora's box, a whole bunch of things come with it.
I've consulted with different people, and some people say you have to go through constitutional change. Other people say absolutely not. So we're going to find that out, but I'm not going to shy away from doing the right thing just because it might be a little challenging.
I appreciate the idea of a professional politician being a negative or spun as a negative and viewed as a negative by people. But, government is a profession in and of itself, right? And being an experienced minister and a capable minister, sometimes you're 8 to 10 years into a job before you realize exactly how it works, right? Like if you're in the opposition benches for 2 terms and then you win government, your law would restrict them from running again should they form government, and you'd have an experienced parliamentarian unable to serve in a cabinet. So what does that do?
I don't think we need that much experience. I was there for 4 years. It doesn't take that long to learn the system. What we really want is people that are, say, we were talking about Newfoundland before we started here, people that are experts in the fishing industry.
Sure.
They can come in and contribute what's going on the ground and make better laws to help our fishermen. That's what we really want. We don't want someone I'm an expert in getting reelected and giving a great slogan and getting reelected and giving another great slogan. I want those people that are in the mining industry. Come in and help us make better laws around mining. Lawyers. I'm a professional engineer by training. Let's make better laws to make our engineering work better. That's what we really want. That's how the system is designed. We have the institutional class of bureaucrats who are there to be experts and help the politicians make the right laws, but it was not designed to have a political class that's professionalized, and it doesn't work.
No, I appreciate that, but term limits are sort of a function of like an American-style system, right? Where you have an executive branch where a cabinet is appointed rather than elected. The Westminster tradition, you elect them. And spending time in opposition to learn things, then going into government, you're using up your time, right?
Not, like if you go back right to the very foundations of history, the Roman had a 1-year limit. The Greeks, when they had their leader, was for 1 year. Granted, things change a lot now.
So a bit more complicated now, I'd say.
1 year, maybe a little less than that, but we don't need career politicians. They're not adding to anything. They're great at giving a speech. They're great at giving a debate. I'll give you an example. Look, I'm a professional engineer. I walk along, I see something broken, and I'm an entrepreneur. So right away, my brain goes, okay, how can I fix it? What can I do? The professional politician sees the same thing that's broken. They say, okay, who can I blame? How can I use this to get more votes? How can I use this to my advantage? I don't want them thinking that way. I want them thinking, we got a problem. I'm here for a short period of time. Might as well roll up my sleeves and get to work.
The other thing, just as a final point, Mr. Baylis, you suggested today is a plan to hit NATO 2% of GDP defense spending by 2030. Mark Carney has a similar position, your path. I'm not sure if maybe he's following you or you're following him.
Let's be clear.
All right. But Chrystia Freeland says she'd do it by 2027, which is in line with what Bill Blair has sort of said publicly that it's doable by then. Why 2030 for you, and do you think 2027 is credible?
Let's be clear. I wrote my article, and it's published a year ago. And in my article, I said that we've signed up for an agreement. We shouldn't sign up for an agreement and go back home and start debating, do we want to honor what we signed? So we're part of NATO. We said we were going to meet 2%, so we have to meet it. I wrote in 2024, that was 6 years time frame to get there. So when you're going to do this kind of spending, you want it to be intelligent. It's very easy to waste money, but we want to be intelligent, and it takes time to properly procure the equipment that we're going to need. There's certain things we can do right away. For example, we're underpaying our soldiers. We can up that right away, but there's a lot of other work that's going to be done. And yes, Mr. Carney is following me, and I'm happy to see that.
Okay, what about in the race itself? Is he following you or are you following him? Because he's got more than half of the caucus and cabinet who can vote endorsing him right now. He seems to be a front runner. Where do you think things stand? How would you measure your strength? And I don't say this to be mean-spirited, but you don't have a caucus endorsement. I don't know if that matters in this race or not. It seems like it does. But where do you think your support is right now?
I did not reach out to, I knew half the caucus because I was there from 2015, 2019. I did not reach out to them beforehand because I thought that would be undermining our Prime Minister. I didn't think it was right. And quite frankly, I'd just been overwhelmed with so many other messages of support. So my challenge is that I need to get my profile up and I need to get people hearing what I'm going to be doing. And every time I do that, more and more people are joining up. So it's a race. It's a shortened time frame. So I am living within that confine there. But I feel very positive that in the next couple of weeks, you'll see me taking more and more space, and my message will get out.
Frank Baylis, Liberal leadership candidate. Thanks for being here. Well, maybe Mark Carney can follow you and come in here. We've been trying to get him on the show. We'd appreciate it. But thank you, sir, for showing up.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Liberal leadership candidates face their next big hurdle tomorrow. They have to submit $125,000 to the party by 5 p.m. Eastern. And one of the candidates thinks that's a little steep.
My campaign doesn't have the deep pockets of some of the other candidates, but what it does have is people power. And I have to say that we have had great fundraising results, and we're going to keep going. So despite the efforts of the party establishment to keep people out of this race, I'm in it and I'm excited about it.
Another leadership candidate, Frank Baylis, was asked if he agrees that the party is trying to keep underdog candidates out of this race.
I understand the party. It's in a very difficult position. This is a very condensed race. We have a very short time period. We're facing an election very quickly afterwards, and we have a gentleman south of the border that's shooting at us all the time. So it makes it for a very stressful time, but I respect what the party's doing, and we're going to work within the confines of the rules that the party's laid out.
Okay, let's bring back the power panel to talk about this. Cameron Ahmad, Gary Keller, Andrew Thompson, and Shachi Kurl. Cameron, let's start with you. I know you said on the show previously you support Karina Gould, that's who you will vote for, but you're not working on her campaign. What do you make of her criticisms there that the party has put a high financial bar with a limited amount of time? She doesn't have the money she needs for tomorrow, but she thinks she might get there. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, firstly, I understand why the party made the decision because, as Frank Baylis said, it's a pretty unique race, pretty unique situation, and you have to set a certain bar to get the right type of candidates in and make it all successful in a very short period of time. But for what Karina's saying, I think it's a rallying cry, as she said on your show just earlier, to her base to make it to the finish line, and a message that her campaign is about regular people, smaller donors, that it's people powered, that she's building from the ground up, and she is different from the other candidates in the sense that she's kind of an underdog and wants to represent that energy. So that's where I think, that's what one says when one is racing to the finish line and working really hard to bring in those last few dollars. But at the end of the day, the bottom line, the most important thing for the party is to have a real race,
right,
where there's an exchange of ideas, where there are strong candidates respectfully battling it out in this short time period. And that's healthy and good for the party. And like I was just saying earlier, I think it's showing that it is, because the party's been able to bring in hundreds of thousands of new supporters and bring in a lot of new fundraising in addition to the money that people are spending on candidates individually.
But Gary, it's interesting. Your party has been through a few leadership races in the last decade or so. This is the first one for the Liberals in a long time. There were debates punctuating throughout the process. I know this is truncated, but there's no debate until after the cutoff, after the membership signups, after the money deadlines. If you are a long shot candidate like Karina Gould, structurally, it's tough to go from third to first when it's set up like that, right?
No, absolutely. And, raising money for a political party can be difficult enough at times. Raising money for a leadership candidate, if you're also seen as being maybe an outsider, is even more difficult. Because remember, in Canada, we have very strict financing rules. So donations of $20 here or $50 there aren't going to get you necessarily over the finish line. Maximum donation anybody can make to a leadership race is $1,700. So you need to put together a lot of people to give max dollars to get to that $125,000 limit. And, as you say, 10 days later, there's another deadline coming up. And so the truncated nature of this campaign makes it difficult for those outsider candidates to try to raise that money. Now, of course, we know why we're in a truncated campaign, because the Prime Minister left it so late, and they have to have their vote before the House is scheduled to come back on March 24th to give a new Prime Minister time for transition, et cetera, if they do, in fact, want to meet Parliament. But yeah, very difficult time. And as you have also noted, during Conservative leadership races, the timeline has been much broader, giving people much more time to raise those kind of dollars to get into the race.
Andrew, how do you see this? Like, until she stepped out of cabinet, if the government House leader is unable to get to the finish line because of a high financial fee on a short time frame, is that a big, broad kind of debate that a party looking to renew wants?
I can understand why the Liberals ended up where they did. And, for everything Gary said, for everything Cameron has said, I think that's all true. But the fact is, they are in a compressed time frame. They do not need 16 people standing on the stage debating like the Conservatives have, including Kevin O'Leary, who got his 1%, at the end of it. I mean, you want to have people that actually are able to, perform, that have, organizations behind them. They're able to draw in that kind of support immediately and hit the ground running. That's as much, I think, what they're trying to demonstrate is that that is the number one criteria for what they're looking for. Now, the good news is they have a couple of candidates who can obviously do that, maybe more than two. And I think that is, it's unfortunate that those candidates who have had a lower profile, those candidates that are still building their reputation in the party, those candidates that don't have any real support from their caucus colleagues, may feel more excluded. But that's the hard knocks of putting together a campaign.
Yeah.
Carney and Freeland seem to have done that fairly effectively. My sense is they represent a debate. I mean, I'm not a Liberal, but they seem to represent a debate within the Liberal Party, a difference of views and opinions on which direction to go. And Liberal voters, I'm assuming, will have a pretty clear choice when they go to cast their ballots.
I would like to see a debate between Chrystia Freeland, the leadership candidate, and Chrystia Freeland, the finance minister, because her leadership policies are very different than her budgets and her fall economic statements. But Shachi, what do you make of this? Like, I mean, it's process, but, it's about hurdles for access to a race to become prime minister, right? I mean, Gould is laying it out there as everybody's an outsider in this race, seemingly, as they frame themselves. But, she is running up against rules that were created to make it difficult to get in. And here you got someone who's, maybe part of the big future of the party who may struggle to get all the way to the finish line here.
Yeah, and, philosophically, this is all about ultimately, this is about timing, right? If the Prime Minister had chosen to leave a year ago, to leave enough time for the party to have a debate on ideas and really open it up. It's also an effect of technology and the way parties elect leaders now. This isn't 40 years ago where you had a convention floor atmosphere where maybe, Karina Gould and her delegates are working the floor and all of a sudden you've got a bit of coalescence around one leader or another. And we've seen it. Who among us has not watched the YouTube video of Eugene Whalen and I think it was Chrétien coming together, and he hands him the cowboy hat, but Chrétien won't put it on. I think this was 1984. Maybe I'm wrong. But in any event, you don't have that kind of excitement. You don't have that kind of energy. You don't have the kind of grassroots atmosphere. So in the absence of that, in a truncated race, in a race that is less about what is the future of the party? What is the philosophical North Star of the party? Where is the party going to be in 5 or even 7 or 10 years? It's let's just pick someone who we think can get elected, and if not that, at least not be humiliated. And that's where we're at. That's just it.
Yeah, I miss the delegated conventions. I hosted a delegated leadership convention in September 2014 when Kathy Dunderdale stepped down as leader of the PC Party of Newfoundland and Paul Davis won. 3 candidates, supposed to be 2 ballots. We thought it'd be over in 2 hours. Second ballot was a tie. And it went on for 8-9 hours. It was nuts. Luckily, we had 1,000 Newfoundland Conservatives in the room with us, so it was easy to fill time. But Cameron, you know, without the urgency of sort of that sort of a moment, it seems like the debates would be the big thing. And we still kind of don't know when we're going to see the candidates face to face, right? I mean, Christopher Freeland is doing a lot of media interviews, so is Karina Gould. Mark Carney has done 1, maybe 2 Canadian media interviews the whole way out. So we don't yet know, haven't had interactions with Mr. Carney. A debate would do that. They may not happen until the week of the Ontario election, is kind of the vibe I'm picking up. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, I mean, of course you'd want as many people as possible to tune in, but the main audience for those debates is those 400,000 or so Liberals.
Is it though, when it's one timeline now going right into an election? Like, don't you need to start thinking about these as opportunities to speak to the whole country and not just the Liberal voters?
Yes, ideally yes, but for all the reasons that have been laid out by my friends on the panel, this race is truncated. It is short, and putting on 2 debates in English and French is a pretty big undertaking, and you have to spend a lot of resources and time to get that right. So I'm sure that if they could have done more, they would have. And a lot of people will hope for, as some of the leadership candidates have said, they wish there were more opportunities to debate, because it would be beneficial, of course. But there's also sort of logistical and practicality reasons as to why the party has picked to just run 2. And you know me, the more interviews, the better. So I think all candidates should keep doing as many Canadian interviews as possible.
So Gary, on that, like going back to our last conversation where we were talking about the polling numbers, is the truncated nature of this, while it has given the governing party this window for renewal, does the truncated nature and the overshadowing of Trump, does it limit a bit of the ability for it to give them a lift, or is it fit in just right in this current dynamic, do you think?
Well, I mean, I think we have to see how it all plays out. I think, we talked about this in the last panel, and, we've talked about, of course, the tightening in the numbers, but does the tightening sort of stop where it is? I think probably not a lot of Canadians are paying attention to a Liberal leadership race. They may have heard that it's going on, but they're not following it closely. And all of a sudden, they're probably going to wake up one day and be like, oh, so-and-so has now won the Liberal leadership. They're going to be prime minister. Oh, I wasn't even paying attention to that. Christopher Freeland, to her credit, I think, has called for 4 leadership debates, which you knew that was never going to happen. But she obviously believed she wanted to have more shots to take on Mark Carney, and that's all fair. But I think we have to see how it shakes out. And look, in both Mr. Carney and Ms. Freeland's cases, you have to laugh at the memory holding of 9 years of policy. They're just throwing it down the chute. And now they've got religion. It's a little bit like an arsonist waking up one morning and saying, I'm really into fire safety. I mean, that's just the reality of what we're seeing.
Yeah, look, politicians are allowed to have their opinions evolve over time, right? And, they are allowed to change their views on positions.
6 weeks.
Well, look, over time, it's a truncated race, Gary. It's truncated decision changes, Come on, this is where we are. It is interesting. It is a sort of a conversation that would be very interesting to have with them. But, Andrew, I wonder, on that, there are big shifts coming. Carney, while an economic advisor to the government, was not the decider in government. So, he does have the ability to say, I gave them advice, they didn't take it all. Some of it was good, some of it was bad. It is where it is. But, for Freeland, if she does come out of this as the winner, will people buy the big shift? Do you think that seems like a tougher sell for her to the broader Canadian electorate?
Yeah, I mean, there's a risk with both of those candidates, right? I mean, with Carney, because he's not participated in the political system, it's hard to tell who's going to do in a debate with Poilievre, who's, a fairly effective debater. We know what he looks like against Freeland. We know what the two of them are as they, go up against each other. We don't know that with Mark Carney. Does he hold together? Does he come out on top? We just don't know. Freeland's challenge, on the other hand, of course, is how does she show that she's both been a loyal Liberal, certainly a senior member of the cabinet, but also has her own views. It's a lot tougher when you're the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance than if you were the Minister of Health. And you can just say, look, I beavered away and all I did was worry about the healthcare of Canadians, and the other decisions were largely out of my hands. When you're sitting there in that position, and maybe it wasn't true, maybe it really is Katie Telford that's just been pulling all the strings, but there's kind of an assumption that the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, have been pretty central to all those conversations. So it's a little harder for her, and maybe she just needs to do a bit more work to explain how she, positioned these different views, or why she now thinks, this instead of what it was.
Yeah.
But it's a tough spot when you've been a senior minister to distance yourself from the administration you were part of.
Shachi, I'm over time. I want to ask you one quick question. We have about 30 seconds. The contrast is right now in the leadership races between Kearney and Freeland, for example, looking at the frontrunners. When we get to the election, is it going to be Kearney versus Poilievre, Freeland versus Poilievre, or is it going to be Kearney versus Trump and Poilievre versus Trump, Freeland versus Trump? You know what I mean? Will that be the contrast? Who stacks up with the president?
Yeah, and I hate to hedge, but it really depends on what happens in the next,
that is totally fair right now.
6 weeks. Like, we have no freaking clue at the moment, and as unsettling as that is, it means that a lot of these dynamics are also going to be pending. I'll just leave it there.
No, it all depends is very true because I also have no freaking clue. All right, I do know we're out of time, so I want to say thank you, Shachi Curl, Cameron Ahmad, Gary Keller, and Andrew Thompson.